team is very excited and interested in this new product. And we will have an innovation challenge after this. After we have that environment. Really want to get lots out of it.
Excellent. So, this solution, again, this is more of a, automated workflow, or sometimes I hear Chris referring to it as a screen flow solution, but it's all around simplifying processes and helping with greater efficiencies. But, we've been in this business for a while now. Vicky, as you know, we acquired the company Manywho. That's where Steve Wood and some other folks at Boomi came from. But this is a natural progression, as you know. And Chris, I don't know if you've got some. I apologize. I didn't pull any. I wanted this session to be more technical than marketing for you guys, Vicky. I know you, but we could talk through the high level of Boomi Flow. But this sort of rounds out our unified platform, because we've got the iPaaS solution, which you guys are very familiar with and using for a number of years. We also have, as part of our solution set, a master data hub solution, or cleansing master data, and we help with B2B and EDI use cases. And also mediation, API design and management. But to round that out, we the acquisition of Manywho was perfect, because it's really a low-code, no-code workflow, or what we like to call an orchestration engine, right? Pulling all the silos or the pieces of stuff, and it's just a nice progression, since you guys are using the integration and the connectors. There's always human interaction, right? And that's really what Flow is all about. So at a high level, just to keep it real simple, from a guy who doesn't get too much in the weeds, that's really where we're making our marks. And there's just so many creative use cases we've got, and that's where we're going to open up the kimono to your organization to get a feel for how GE could potentially use this solution. Chris, I don't know if you've got any high-level slides that talks to, an introduction to Flow, or how you want to get started. But yeah, I'm more for having you dig right into the weeds with the team, because I think they'll get it.
This is kind of the approach I took. I do have a few slides around a use case, an onboarding use case, which is a really common use case. And then I have our example portal that has a few other examples that I was going to go through, but I wanted to keep the slides light. But I just wanted to highlight a few things that are some background items that are kind of important in the examples, because the examples highlight a lot of collaboration, device independence, and things like that. So I don't really have the top-down who is Boomi. I'm just really focusing on Flow.
And I think that's fine. I mean, we're going to be, we keep it more technical for the team here. That's absolutely fine, Chris.
Okay. So if somebody could make me a presenter, so I can share my screen.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, great.
Got that?
Got it. So I should see a screen that says DellBoomi Unified Platform. And by the way, I'm pretty unscripted. I'm pretty, anyone who's on the phone, I'd rather take this as kind of a collaborative learning opportunity. So I want to show you some examples, kind of set the context, but really don't hesitate to ask, and don't be embarrassed by the question, because Flow is different than Atomsphere.
Hey Chris, we can't see your presentation. I think the screen is not visible. So,
I'm sorry, you can or you cannot?
No, we cannot, yeah.
There is an arrow, it says, with the presentation.
Okay, so what do we do? Do we have Chris rejoin?
Let me just stop and try it again. Skype is kind of flaky that way. Sometimes you can just try it again.
Or you may have to like disconnect and reconnect. I think that also works. That worked yesterday.
An error occurred during the screen. Yeah, I saw that.
Okay.
I'll disconnect and rejoin. Be right back then.
Okay.
Yeah, if this doesn't work in the next 5 minutes, we can all switch to Zoom, right? Tom, you can set up your Zoom service.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, let's just try once more. I know we have quite a few people, and it's frustrating that we cannot get to it. Let's. We'll post something. I can resend the invite.
Okay, Tom, if you can make me the presenter again.
I think Vicky did it.
Vicky?
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see.
It's done.
Which? Oh, it's done.
No error this time.
Are you sharing anything?
It says that he's sharing. At least the icons have changed. So
there we go.
Okay, here we go.
So you should see DellBoomi's unified platform.
Yep.
I can see. Yep.
So again, it is different than AtomSphere. So just to kind of set the context in your heads, everyone, feel free to ask questions. So this is my only marketing slide. So familiar with the center, which is AtomSphere, and the platform includes the EDI capabilities as well as API design, which is what I still keep calling it the proxies to AtomSphere, just to kind of level set. But the ability to take some of your listeners and expose them as a more formal interface, a more formal API. And we have the master data hub for synchronization, and we have this new thing called Flow. And it's kind of hard to put a label on it because it has some of the characteristics of a workflow or some of the characteristics of a BPM, but it really isn't either. It's not your traditional, workflow that you would see within an application, either like Salesforce, Workday, or e-business suite. It's a little bit different in that it's meant to extend outside the application, but also to be highly visible. And it's also, I guess it's a 21st century version of a workflow engine in that it's device independent, and it's also based on a lot of open standards, because one of the problems with most workflow systems coming from my background is they're all proprietary. So whatever workflow you learn within one application is totally different from another application, whereas with Flow, it's all based on open standards, and it's all transparent. Like the metadata is all available to you. So I expected to hear a roar of approval from the crowd. It's like, yeah, you can see everything. You can see, unlike AtomSphere, where, it's like, kind of the Apple walled garden example. This is all open. And even the visual components, it's meant for you to take it and run with it. So all the layouts are based on Bootstrap. All the UI components are based on React. So if you've ever done any work with React, Facebook's web framework, that's what we use. And you have the ability to either extend the components that are there or add your own. I have to pace myself because I have a tendency to go way off script. But just to give you an idea, it's a different type of workflow. And I'm going to try to make that case through an onboarding example to give you an idea how it's similar to a BPM, but different. So, like AtomSphere, is there a question?
Chris, yeah, a quick question. Is the expectation that the AtomSphere will merge or become the unified platform at some point of time, or is it expectation they'll remain in parallel and people can choose between the unified platform or the AtomSphere?
They're different. In other words, if you've used AtomSphere and you've branched off into API management or MDM, you recognize that those products depend upon AtomSphere. They're really extensions of AtomSphere. Flow is it's both an extension, but it's also independent. You could use Flow and never use AtomSphere. So it's meant to interact. So AtomSphere could be its integration platform, or it could be part of its integration platform. So if you're invoking a bunch of services, if you're getting data for some of your widgets, it doesn't really care. Flow doesn't really care whether it's making API calls through AtomSphere. It's not bound to AtomSphere. There is some secret sauce where it makes it really easy to work with AtomSphere. There's a new control in AtomSphere called a Flow server that makes it very easy to integrate with AtomSphere. So if you wanted to create a new type of listener, there's now a Flow server listener. For anybody who's familiar with AtomSphere, I know you use the web service listener, but now there's a new one that's a Flow listener, and it handles integration with Flow behind the covers. Like, it just lets you focus on JSON payloads. You don't really have to care about any of the header information. You don't have to care about any of the metadata. There's a lot of metadata information that's passed between Flow and AtomSphere, for example, especially if you want to do asynchronous work. So, that's another big opportunity you have here, where you can have workflows that, they're stateful. So they can set up a variety of listeners, and, AtomSphere can basically publish data to Flow at will, and Flow can react accordingly. So,
thanks for that. I think, so got it. So maybe you can.
So I have a question around it.
Sure.
Hey, Sandeep, listen. Hey, you spoke about the differences from BPM, and traditionally BPM has been more of process designing, modeling tools, where the shift was to the business teams to model their business processes and then let the implementers implement it. So what changes does this bring, compared to what we have? Does it empower all the people down up, wherein the implementers do their job and then demonstrate it, or it's still like it has the process modeling, you can still import the UMLs, things like that?
It doesn't do the UML import. So it would be, it's less formal, I guess I would say. In other words, it's not really meant to fit into that sort of formal design paradigm where you have a variety of tools and you're doing VPMN type of modeling. It doesn't really require you to do, to know like a modeling notation. It doesn't support anything that. It's meant to do things much quicker. You know how AtomSphere is kind of a strange animal, and that it's geared towards this role of a citizen integrator, which is kind of a technical person but not a coder. Well, this is the same way, in that this is geared towards a business person who wants to model a flow but really doesn't know BPMN, doesn't know formal tools, but literally could create a little app, a little process that they could deploy as a web app.
Right.
So again, it's if that's a 21st century kind of use case of a BPM, then that's what this is. Like, to compare it to something like BPM Suite and something like Oracle, where your visualization layer is really a portal. I mean, you're really restricted to tasks, orchestrating tasks in a portal. In this case, the world's, there is no limit on the visualization layer. The visualization layer can be anything you need. It can be charts, it can be dashboards, it can be, it can be pretty much anything. And then the execution of that visualization layer is meant to be device agnostic. So you could literally start a process on a desktop and then join it through a text message on your phone and continue on it, because it'll run. We have this concept of a device-independent player that executes the workflow. So again, that's different than a typical BPM, because it doesn't really enforce that that rigid design paradigm on you, which some people like and some people don't.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, at a high level, folks, the flow, similar to Atmosphere, like Chris was going, was really a very flexible and fast orchestration or workflow solution. The business folks like it because it's it's all about go to market and standing up use cases very easily versus some of your traditional BPM solutions. So that's sort of it at a high level.
So this is a quick question. So are you guys building UI screens?
Yes, through Flow.
Through Flow, okay.
Okay, so you probably haven't noticed it, but if you go to the Atmosphere desktop and you click on the tabs to the right that allow you to switch to other Boomi services, Flow is there. So MD, metadata or master data hub is there. API management Flow is there, so you can switch from the desktop or you can go directly into Flow. So this is just showing that here is the output of a workflow, where on the right you have the web version, you have the web view, and on the left you have the cell view. It doesn't matter whether it's iOS or Android, it's going to render the same way, because Bootstrap behind the scenes is doing the magic as far as recognizing the screen parameters, and it's flowing the UI widgets and rendering them properly.
Okay, so one question. So with if we build our own UI outside of Boomi, can we able to connect the components underneath the Flow components?
You can, okay, because again, when you move into the Flow world, you're now introducing code that's running in the browser. So when you execute a workflow, a flow, it's basically a URL that's rendered in something called a player, which is really just an HTML. It's HTML that can be embedded in it can be embedded in a page. It could act as the UI, or it could be iframed. And that player is meant to be extended. So the thing that renders the UI is meant to be extensible. You can style it. You get out of the box a lot of different styling, but you can restyle the way the workflow looks to your look and feel, and you can mix and match any other components in it, because it's just HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And I'll show you some examples of that. So this is one of the points here, is that it allows parallel process orchestration. So what does that mean? It means you can basically orchestrate processes in parallel across different roles. So in other words, you could start an onboarding process internally, and then at some point in time, a customer or an employee joins it, depending upon whether you're onboarding a customer or onboarding an employee. And you have the ability to wait for different responses and to rejoin the parent. So you could branch off as many, into as many parallel processes as you want, all basically interacting real time. So that's another key thing. So this is, not only do you have the ability to join into a process and be part of that process, you have the ability to start parallel processes, join the parallel processes, and then to merge the parallel processes to get back into the parent. But all the processes can real time talk to each other. So you have the ability to have chat windows, reactive components. So if data in one wants to change the UI in the other, have a widget that you want, the whole React framework is based on reacting to state changes. So being able to recognize a state change and display the UI accordingly is all part of the platform. And this is just showing, waiting for a thing, and then at this point when it's all done, it joins the parents. So I'm going to start with this onboarding one, but I have a few other ones that I can show you that involve some Atmosphere integration. So this one starts with a dashboard view. It's basically showing opportunities, and it launches this onboarding project. So the point here is basically to onboard a new customer. So, and it's doing it in parallel. So there are some things that are being done by the agent who is responsible for the sale, and there are some things that are being done by the customer who is basically buying the product, things like confirming the order, whatever. So again, it starts with one screen here on the left, a view of the opportunities. The agent is going to start it where they're going to launch the project. They're going to continue on with their task, and the customer is going to continue on with their task, and at some point they're basically going to merge back together and confirm the completion of the onboarding task. Questions? You good with the basic concept? So I'll take that as a yes. So I'm just going to, again, just BPM. So, BPM we would look at as being much more heavyweight than what we're capable of doing with Flow. We can do the same thing in a much lighter, more open platform. It'll execute the same way as a BPM, but it can execute across, different devices. And you have the ability to blend in, existing interfaces or to extending the components that are part of our platform pretty easily, because everything's based upon open standards. So I'm just going to switch.
One question, Chris.
Sure.
I think we spoke about this during our session also, but there was a concept that came out of ad hoc BPMs wherein the orchestrator is the one who designs or who defines the next step into the flow, rather than the flow itself taking a linear path of what the next step is. So does this provide us the ability, like as a human, the task could be in any random order, right? It's not specifically meant to be sequential in nature. Something could come first rather than the later. So is that an ability of this product to do that?
Yes, you have the ability to connect the lines for Flow to kind of make a decision as to what branch to take, what next process to take. That was the bot example where there's instead of having a bunch of statically defined decision points, you can define some rules as to what the transition will be to the next flow step. That's one of the possibilities. Because bots are creating bots are one of the common use cases, but I would say the most common one is this onboarding one, which is what I would start with. So let's go through this one, and then we can take a look at a few other examples, and we can go into the covers, and you can kind of see the implementation as well. So this Boomi Flow portal is what we're talking about making available to you. The interesting thing is this is a flow. This whole UI, everything here was all designed as a workflow. So you could easily just import the JSON. All the workflows are implemented as a JSON document. So all the metadata that represents this workflow is all JSON, and you can easily import and export. That's the way you move things back and forth between different flow accounts. So what we were talking about doing was giving you this flow portal with a bunch of pre-seeded examples, but also because you have the workflow that is the backing of this portal, you can easily add your own. Just follow the template. So I'm going to go in and this one here is, here's a startup screen that we have just where you can set some options and choose whether, which onboarding example you're going to do. So I'm putting in my email so I can be notified. I'm going to say I want to do the customer onboarding one. You can theme it. Again, this is really for demo purposes. And then what it does is it creates a URL, a custom URL. So everything in Flow, the way you access the Flow is through a URL that's generated. So, and that's how you join flows as well. So if I was to send this URL to someone as part of an email or as part of a text message, they can join this process, and we'll show an example of that. So here's my first screen. I'm the agent. I've got some customers that I have an opportunity that's closed in my CRM system, and I basically want to fulfill the order, and I want to onboard a new customer. So if I pick one of these orders, and by the way, I can see different things. I can see things that are in flight, what their status is. I can look at either all projects or just the ones that are active implementations, one that are either new orders or orders that are in stage whatever of the onboarding process. Again, this whole UI, all these widgets, all the data, this is all part of the workflow. This is all designed with the Flow product. So I'm going to launch this workflow. So here's the onboarding project, and I click to pre-seed the data. So instead of having me to key in all the data, because this demo is backed with some secret sauce, it's filling in the data for me. So I can pick who I assign it to. So you see normal drop-down widgets, tables, whatever. Again, you've got buttons. This is your typical web user interface. So if this is the project, I want to initiate a project. I'm going to assign it to this person. I've got the contact email, and here's just a little summary of the line that I picked. So I've got 100 widgets, opportunity ID 1. Then I want to initiate the agent workflow as well as kick off the client workflow, what the client has to do. So let me just show you some examples here. So I'm going to join this. So now on the left is the agent. On the right is basically the client view. So the client can see that this widget has been kicked off. I'm just going to independently work on either side. So as I'm the agent, I can basically fulfill the order by saying, well, I want 10 widgets. I want to overnight them. And for internal purposes, I may have a few different internal systems that I have to provision as part of the onboarding process. And I can put in any notes and such that I want. I'll click review, and basically it's just showing me a review of what I selected on the previous screen. So it's extending the price. I can see my comments. These are the systems that I picked to provision. And then I can say, next step. So here's a case now where we're now going to wait because the agent's process depends upon the customer taking some steps before it can go to the next step. So now if I go back to the right side, which is the customer side for this 100 widgets, I can go in, and this is a simulation of the customer having to review an order document and confirm it. We just sent just a PDF file, but this PDF file was generated as through workflow. So you have the ability. We do a lot of one of the use cases is document processing or document management. So to be able to create PDF files for people to review, process, sign, and for you to maintain a repository of them again is another use case. So this is just showing we just dummied this up with a document, which is just some documentation. But this would be like the order document coming in. The customer reviews it, they confirm receipt. The customer's part is now complete. So you can see that it coordinated back. The parent flow was waiting for the completion. And now that first line here, the task is marked as complete. If you wanted to now collaborate further, if I return to the parent, just to show you, I can say I'm all done. You can see how the document on the right is synced with the left. So the ability to coordinate real time. This could be anything. This could be, notices throughout the life of the process. It doesn't have to be at this endpoint. So this is showing you a process that started in the agent side. The customer received an email where they were invited to join, I just clicked on the tab to join, and the customer did, the agent got to a point in the process where it needed the customer to do something. The customer confirmed the document, and then the process was marked as complete here on the left, and now they can, do comments back and forth, whatever. Questions? I mean, did that make sense as far as some of the interactions that we had? That's something you can't do. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry for the interruption. So one quick question. So you are saying this is kind of a UI page that we are building, which will work for the mobile as well. Is that right?
Yeah. So this is a UI. We basically built a visual process on top of a series of integrations. So that's what's different here, in that with Atomsphere, it's system-to-system integration. So you're moving data based upon system events, scheduled processes, whatever. What this does is this gives you the ability to add people to the process and to visualize with the data, and also collaborate with various parties as part of the process. So that's what we were showing, the visualization, and we were showing the collaboration, the real-time collaboration.
Right.
But if you want,
will get adjusted to the screen when I open it in the mobile.
Yeah, let's do that. Let me launch another one.
Okay.
Hey, Chris, while you're doing that, I had a question just come in. Does Flow incorporate machine learning? Does Flow require a database for data persistence?
There is a data service available to you, and when we get in, when I actually open the Flow, I'll show you the different components. So if we can table that for a minute,
okay,
we'll get to that. Let's join another process here. So I'm going to click. Let's open this in a new tab, and I'll show you what I did.
How about user authentication?
Again, when you create a flow, you pick your identity service when you first create the flow, but you have the ability to either use an authentication service that is specific to the process or specific to swim lanes, because in most cases it's specific to swim lanes. You may have a swim lane that represents the agent flow within, and then you may have a swim lane that would represent some external customer flow, where maybe for the agent flow you're using your internal identity store. For the customer actions you're using Okta or AAD or some external SAML or OAuth token. So, and again, I'll show you those examples when we get there, because this one we didn't have to authenticate. But so let's go back to the mobile one, and then we'll jump into those other questions. So again, on the left, I'm the agent. On the right, I'm the client. So the client has joined, and you can see that this new process 182, so here's the implementation ID 182, and here on the right, here's the implementation ID 182 for the customer. Let's look at it though. Let's say that the customer actually got this URL sent on as a text message on their phone. So now you can see that screen. I'm just using the dev tools in Chrome to reframe this. You can see now that screen on the customer side is reframed for a mobile device. So if I hit 10 here, I can provision this system, I can review it, onward, and I'll go back to the customer side, because on the left it's going to wait for the customer to do something. I can hit next, and they'll see that same PDF coming in. Again, totally device agnostic. Confirm the receipt. On the left here, the customer or the agent will recognize that it's done. And here on the right, if the customer wants to return to the parent process and come down here and send some notes, thanks. You can see I'm typing it on the right. You can see it on the left. Does that help? So again, that same UI was just rendered in a simulated mobile device. You can see it, no change were required to the UI.
So one more question here. So does user need to download any app for it, or like this will open in a Chrome browser or something like that?
Yes, the user only needs this URL. So the user typically, like if I go back here to my mailbox, I have some flows here. Remember I put my email in at the beginning and said I wanted to be notified? So here's my flow. So this click to join takes me to that flow. It's finished because I just finished it, but that's typically how you deliver it. You deliver it via email or you deliver it via text. So we have examples here where we usually use Twilio because it's device independent as a text messaging service. And I'll actually show you an example of that next, where a customer joins and interacts just through a text message. So, I mean, hopefully that gave you an example of, that was a collaborative example, and we showed, device independence on that.
Got it.
Let's just go back to the example portal.
Yeah, we have an integration in Boomi with Twilio. I can visualize that.
Yeah, so here's one that this one uses something under the covers with AtomSphere. So if I go into AtomSphere, I have a example. So this one here is a good example for someone who's familiar with AtomSphere. So we have this is a simple API called Patient API. It basically takes a Boomi process right here and exposes it as a REST service. So in other words, it's listening for a patient ID, it does a lookup for the patient data, converts it to JSON, and sends it back. So for those who've never seen an API in Boomi, an API basically is just another component. So from your home screen, you're familiar with processes. An API is just a different component that gives you the ability to create a formal definition to the listener. I know that you're using Simple or SOAP web service listeners. This gives you the ability to create a RESTful version of that SOAP listener, an OData version, as well as a SOAP 1.2, and to add it to a catalog, and also to secure it differently. So it's an extension on what you're already familiar doing. There's this other thing called a flow service. That was that secret sauce item, that new shape that gives you the ability to just send JSON data to from a flow and to not really be concerned with any of the technicalities of calling RESTful services. So the flow service is available without the API. If you just wanted, you know how you use your simple listeners now, your simple web service listeners, you could just create a bunch of flow services as simple flow listeners as well going forward. But this process here, gets the request for a patient and sends the patient data back. Well, someone says, well, that's great, but I don't want to send the patient data without an approval. So this gives you the ability to add an approval layer to it. So let's say I wanted data for a certain employee. Does somebody want to give me their phone number? And because you can act as the approval for this, because you're going to get a text message where you're going to have to approve it. Or do you want me to put mine in if you don't want to share it?
Oh, you can put my phone number, please.
Sure.
248 420 248 420 7551.
Okay. So I'm going to request an approval. So it's going to call, before it calls that API, you're going to get a text message where it's going to ask you to approve.
I got it. Yes.
Okay.
So I should say yes.
Yeah, so say yes.
Okay.
And then it will show the data once it's approved on the screen. So instead of you making a query, someone has to approve that you're allowed to see it. So request approved. If I go into AtomSphere, okay, here's the patient API that was just called. So here's the data that came in for 1001. See? And, did the database lookup. But Flow acted as the intermediary. So Flow basically made the request. And this is someone kind of blurred the line here. So when the data comes back, when the medical documents come back, we have the ability to do document processing. So if you wanted to create a document called "Bring Your Own Device," you can add extra data here, and it'll add it to the document. And just to keep it simple, I'm going to say I want an offer letter generated, and I'm going to call it. Let's say they're an architect. And you can see that when it generates the document in the flow, it'll put all that data in. So you have the ability to not only, in this case, it would be an approval as well as a subsequent document generated with that data. Okay, so there's Sam Jones, G Digital, whatever I put in. So again, it's just showing you how you can add a layer on top of that AtomSphere integration. That's very practical. So, to go back to that Flow demo portal, this is a flow built on top of an AtomSphere patient API, where it's highlighting the approval. And again, I know that you folks wanted to be able to seed this in your environment, so you can see if you have this portal, it's very easy for someone just to come in and click and run any of these examples. So is this making sense?
Yeah. So just one question, Chris. The ability to generate PDFs and everything is already embedded, or are you using some libraries out there for Boomi?
Well, let's take a look at that. Let's go into Flow. So I'm going to go into Flow. I'm going to sign into my account, and the first thing it asks you in Flow is for you to select a tenant. So Flow has this concept of a tenant, which I like to think of as almost like a database schema, where you can create as many tenants as you want for your account, and it's where the data is stored. It's where your flows. It's where the metadata is stored. So some people do tenants based upon a project. Some people do tenants based upon an environment. So they'll have like a dev, a test, a production tenant. It's pretty flexible that way, in that you have the ability in Flow to you have an ability in Flow beyond what you have in AtomSphere to keep your things private and to track changes, and because all the metadata is available to you, you do have the ability to now store all your metadata and such in a source control system or whatever. So my account, I can easily switch from one tenancy to another. Tenancy is just one of my work areas, if that makes any sense. So this is the Flow desktop, and I've got a few flows here, one of which is this Onboarding API. So I can go in and edit that. And here is my flow. There's a start shape where we put in employee ID. It made it a service call to get approval. If it's not approved, then basically it's it's going to confirm that it's not approved. If it was approved, it's going to go and get the user patient information. So this approval here, this service call here, is actually the call out to Twilio. Okay, so it's calling an SMS service, and we're defining what the input and output is. But over here, it's basically calling the Atomsphere service. So you have the ability with Flow to set up services and then to share them in a flow. Everything here is meant to be reused. Let me just back up for a second before I apologize. I got into this a little bit too deep. Let me give you the high level view, and then we'll go back to that example. So at a high level, Flow has a number of options here that are kind of important. Things like you can create page views, and those page views can then be shared across multiple workflows. So it's similar to Atomsphere in that everything is meant to be reused, but in this case, besides just things like maps and such, now you're dealing with the whole visualization layer can be reused. You also have the ability to create types and values. So think of types as analogous to your profiles in Atomsphere. So in this case, you're going to go in and define a type that represents an object. And maybe the type would be an inbound request for a service or an outbound request. But it could also be data that is passed between screens. It can be anything behind the scenes. A value is basically an instance of that type. So you can precede a lot of your types with data, so that when someone is building a flow, all the defaults and such are already available to them. So they just pick a data value, and the underlying type has already been defined previously. Services is where you can go in, and Flow comes preceded with a number of services, but you can also build your own. So the Atomsphere service that was called for the API was on the previous screen, I think. It's one of these. I apologize for which one it is. Oh, here it is. Boomi API. So to create a service in Flow, all you do is give it the URL that represents the endpoint of the service. It's basically that simple. If the service is secured, you would have to pick, give it credentials to be able to access it. But once that service is defined, then that service can be shared and used across across any workflows. One of the things that's different about Flow is, just as I mentioned, it's based on standards, like all the metadata is represented as JSON. All the workflows are represented as JSON. The runtime container is pure HTML5. Your APIs for Flow, for outbound services, everything in Flow is RESTful. So when you're calling an API, this Boomi API, this patient service it's a RESTful call to Atomsphere. So REST is the language, the service language within Flow. REST is also the language to Flow's API. So you have the ability in Flow to make API calls. I don't know if the folks on the phone are familiar with the Atomsphere REST API or the Atomsphere API connector, where you can basically call via APIs what the UI does. So if you wanted to do a deployment via an Atomsphere API call, a lot of folks don't know about that, but you can do that with Flow. The APIs are kind of front and center, all the REST APIs. So there's a little test harness here that's, I guess it's similar to some ways like Postman or whatever, where you can call any of the APIs. So if you wanted to test an API call either to an external service or to Flow, you can do it right here. Import-export is where you can import or export the JSON that represents a flow. Players are the HTML that is the container. So like here's the default. So here is the HTML that you can embed in another page that would invoke the flow. You can create new players. So if I wanted to create a new player, give it a name, and I can select one of the existing players and tweak it if I wanted to. And this gives you the ability to embed either imports to external custom components, custom styling, whatever. It's all done through the Flow player. So this is the client side. This is the runtime container for the workflow.
Hey, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Vicki.
Yeah, Tom, I think it's
just
a time check. Yes.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, so a lot of information here with 3 or 4 minutes left. Vicki and team, what we were thinking, and I want your feedback. We wanted to, as Chris mentioned, we want to give you guys access to, sort of clone the Flow library and give you access to the use cases and so forth. What I was thinking is setting up another session, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot more questions, and we could dig a little deeper with you and just make sure you guys are aware of what's possible. And on that next call, I'll also include Chris Capetto, who's one of our Flow specialists, along with Chris Cassidy, and Cheryl Ingram is the Flow specialist. But I could follow with getting you guys high-level slides and a data sheet, but I want to spend maybe, Chris, the next 2 or 3 minutes. Let's talk about what we could do to get them access, and then we'll set up another session here, because I think everybody's got to stop here.
Right, definitely. So the quick question, Tom, the Flow library, is it just showing the libraries our team can play around, create their own little flows?
No, the Flow demo portal is a collection of flows like this one, where either you can load it here in the desktop and you can go in and run it as a developer and you'll see the same thing, or you could just run this directly from the portal. So it gives you the ability to pre-seed the portal with a few examples, but then your developers or anybody who wants to run it under the covers can go in here. This is like Atomsphere's desktop, where you can come in and you can run it on demand. You can debug it as well. So if you wanted to, this is just the JSON. This is a visual representation of the JSON that you can import or export.
But you cannot edit or make changes or play around. It's not a development portal, right?
The other portal is a run portal. So this guy here, Boomi Flow, this is a flow. This is a run portal. So if someone wants to come in here and run it, they can look at the details. They can download it to their own tenancy. So if they clicked on this, it will give them the ability to import the JSON, or they can just run it right from here.
Okay, I got it. I think we need both, the demo portal and also the runtime, the platform, so we can play around the tenant.
Yep. Yeah, because as soon as you run it, someone's going to say, well, I want to see this view. I want to actually start it. I want to run it in the sandbox. So this gives you the ability, with a Flow account, you can just run it from here. And this same thing.
Another question, the sandbox access, do you have any limitation on the number of people can access, or
nope.
As you see, no?
No, Flow, now, because keep in mind, Flow is different than Atomsphere in that when you get an account, you're saving your metadata in your tenant. When you're executing on the Flow servers as well as within your browser, because now it's visual, so you've got a lot of code that is actually running in the browser, your UI code. And Flow is built to be infinitely scalable, so the platform itself that's executing the workflows is, scaling up and down.
Yeah,
that's good. I want to get access to all of us,
Yeah, so Vicky, the intent here is we'll continue the education. You have full support of our team, Chris and others, to make sure you've got what you need to look at the various use cases, get creative, give you ideas, test it, kick it around. I think we use the term Flow Hackathon. Have you guys hack away and and figure out how you guys could leverage this solution in a good way to help improve efficiency. So whatever you need, I know we're sort of running out of time, but I'll work with you and Ajay and team. If we want to have I would expect we'll get you access to this stuff, and then we'll want to have a follow-up.
That sounds good. So I think if you have any tutorial about Flow, high level, the team can share with us, and then set up the access, the Flow library and the sandbox. I would say maybe let the team play around for a week or two, and then there will be more questions. I think the next session will be more productive once team has a feel of the tool, of the product.
Today was, exposure through the fire hose. So I just wanted to just plant a few seeds that you can see how it's collaborative, and it's independent, but it's also can leverage Atomsphere, and there's a lot you can do with it. This docs.manywho.com is where all the Flow documentation is, or you can actually branch to it from within Atomsphere. But there's a lot. There's all tutorials here. There's lots of different samples. It's pretty easy to do some stuff.
Cool. So Chris, you'll be able to work today to get Vicky what she needs to get access to that the library and the sandbox. Just let me know if there's anything I have to get the team.
Nope. We just need somebody to set up an account, and then they'll import everything that's in that demo portal, because again, this is only a Flow.
Okay.
So this is you'll have access to not only the visual part, but you'll have access to the underlying code for this, and you can change any of this. You can add other examples pretty easily.
Ajay, anything else that you want to add?
So is that food for thought for folks? As far as
It's wonderful. Looking forward to get the hands dirty.
Good.
Yeah, thanks for this session. I think we got a lot of folks, 40 plus people on the call. Getting access to that session, and being able to walk through a simple build would give us a lot more insight into creating our own Flow hackathons. So there is an internal challenge out there within our team to see if we can build services. I see the idea. Let's see if we can take this into and actually build something out there.
Awesome. Yeah, so Ajay, if you need anything you need to help with a walkthrough on a simple build as a follow-up, we're happy to do, and then get you guys on your way.
Right. It'll be good if we can have a couple of folks who actually, spear the initiation process, get everybody thinking, and then we can have a session on, hey, this is not working, or maybe that's not working. I think that'll be a more productive session when we get that.
That's Excellent. A good idea. I think it's the trainer.
Yes. So you got full support from us. So whatever you need, Vicky, Ajay, and anybody else, just keep me posted on what We'll get you access first, and we'll start from there.
Okay.
Sounds good. Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.